The courtroom has no walls, only infinite horizons stretching into eternity, where sky meets void. Every god in creation kneels in concentric circles, their divine light dimmed to witness what must be witnessed. At the center, Ra sits on a throne of pure solar fire, his falcon head turning slowly between two figures who kneel before him, both bleeding gold into the cosmic sand. Horus's left eye socket weeps light where Set's fingers tore it free. Set's body bears 80 wounds, one for each year of war. Between them floats a single ostrich feather, Ma'at's feather of truth, rotating in air that has never known wind. Thoth stands ready with his reed pen, preparing to write a verdict that will echo through 3,000 years of human prayer. The war for Egypt's throne is over. The trial for heaven's soul begins now. This is ancient Egypt uncovered, and this is Set versus Horus, the divine trial that split heaven in half. You've heard of their war, uncle against nephew, chaos against order, the desert against the river. But here's what the papyrus scrolls don't tell you. The battle was never the real story. The real story began the moment both gods survived. Because how do you judge a deity who saved Egypt by trying to destroy it? How do you punish an uncle who loved his nephew enough to blind him? What you're about to discover isn't just divine justice. It's the moment heaven learned that some crimes between family can never truly be judged. They can only be divided. To understand why Set stands trial, we need to go back to the night when he first speared Apophis for Ra, when he was still heaven's greatest defender, not its most infamous criminal. Thoth calls the first witness. Ra himself rises from his solar throne, and the courtroom dims as if clouds have passed over the sun. Every night, Ra begins, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. When I descended into the Duat, when darkness threatened to swallow creation itself, Set stood at the prow of my bark, alone. The court sees it now, exhibita materializing in divine light. Set, muscles coiled like rope, driving his spear through the chaos serpent Apophis, again and again, again. 365 nights a year, 3,000 years running. While his brother Osiris ruled the comfortable daylight world, Set bled in darkness, protecting them all. He never missed a night, Ra continues, not once. But here's where the story turns. Thoth produces Exhibit B, a golden scroll bearing Ra's own seal, the decree that divided Egypt between the brothers. Osiris received the Kemet, the Black Land, fertile soil deposited by the Nile's flood, where crops grew tall and people prospered. Set? He got the Deshret, the Red Land, barren desert, where nothing grew but scorpions and the bones of travelers who lost their way. The court shifts uncomfortably. Even divine justice can cut unevenly. There's more, Thoth says, unrolling another papyrus. The prophecy every god knew but none spoke aloud, that Osiris's son would one day unite the two lands under a single crown. Set's inheritance wasn't just inferior, it was temporary, destined to be absorbed by his brother's bloodline. The final piece of evidence makes even the divine jury lean forward. The birth announcement of Horus, Osiris's son. The scroll shows Set's response, recorded by a minor deity who happened to be present. So my brother gets the fertile land, the throne, and now an heir to take what little I have left? Set had smiled when he said it, but the scribe noted something else, how Set's hand had moved unconsciously to his spear. The same spear that had protected them all. The same spear that would soon turn against his own blood. The court murmurs. Was the crime born that night, in that moment of bitter realization? Set lowers his head in the defendant's chair, and the feather of Ma'at trembles on its scale. The trial demands its first confession, and Set, protector turned destroyer, must finally tell them what happened the night he stopped defending heaven and started tearing it apart. Isis rises from her place among the witnesses, and the court falls silent. The goddess of magic needs no spells today, only memory. Her voice, when it comes, carries the weight of every widow who has ever searched for answers in the dark. My husband, trusted him. The words hang in the air like incense smoke. At the feast of the 72nd day, when Set unveiled that beautiful coffin, crafted from cedar and gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, Osiris saw only his brother's generosity. Her hands tremble as she recreates the moment. Set said it was a game. Whoever fit perfectly inside would win this masterpiece. The court watches her relive it, the laughter of gods, the wine flowing like the Nile itself, the way Osiris smiled as he lay down in what would become his tomb. The measurements were exact, Isis continues, her voice breaking. Every dimension crafted to my husband's body. When the lid came down, she stops, breathes, forces herself to continue. My husband called his brother's name, and the river answered instead. The lead seal. The molten metal poured over the seams. The sound of Set's laughter as 72 conspirators carried Egypt's king to the water's edge. These details pour from Isis like blood from a wound that never healed. But then Set speaks, and his defense chills the divine assembly more than his crime ever could. A weak king invites chaos. His voice carries no remorse, only the terrible clarity of conviction. Look at what Egypt had become under my brother's rule. Soft, vulnerable. While he played at agriculture and civilization, our enemies gathered at our borders. I merely hastened what neglect would bring. The gods shift uneasily. This is not the defense of a madman, but something far more dangerous. The logic of necessary cruelty. Set stands before them not as a criminal seeking mercy, but as a surgeon explaining an amputation. You call it murder, Set continues, his red eyes scanning the assembly. I call it preservation. Every kingdom needs its blade, its willingness to cut away weakness before it spreads. Osiris forgot that truth comes in many forms, including violence. The divine assembly erupts. Some gods shout condemnation, others exchange troubled glances. Was Set preserving order or destroying it? Can brutality ever serve justice? Ra's voice cuts through the chaos like sunlight through storm clouds. Order without truth is still chaos, Set. And truth without mercy becomes tyranny. The sun god's pronouncement silences the court. He raises his hand, and reality itself seems to pause, waiting for his next words. The court will recess. When we reconvene, we will hear from one more witness. Ra's ancient eyes find a figure in the crowd, young but carrying himself with deadly purpose. The court will hear from Horus, the child of the victim, who brings his own claim to heaven's throne. Horus rises from the gallery of gods like a blade being drawn from its sheath. At barely 25 years old, an infant by divine standards, he moves with the precision of someone who has rehearsed this moment 10,000 times in dreams of vengeance. I was 3 days old when my mother fled with me into the papyrus marshes. His voice carries across the cosmic courtroom, steady as the Nile's flow. 3 days old, when she began teaching me the weight of a crown I'd never worn. He reaches toward his face, and the assembled gods lean forward. With deliberate slowness, Horus removes what appears to be a perfect golden eye. But as he holds it up to Ra's light, it becomes something else entirely. The eye transforms into a miniature sun, pulsing with its own internal fire. Every sunrise you witness, grandfather, passes through this socket. He gestures to the scarred hollow where his left eye should be. Set took it during our first battle. Now half of heaven's light flows through a wound. Thoth steps forward, his ibis head tilting as sacred scrolls materialize in the air around him. The court will now review 80 years of divine combat, reduced to evidence. The first scroll unfurls, and suddenly the courtroom fills with phantom images, translucent memories playing out above the gods' heads. There's young Horus, chest heaving, pulling a golden harpoon from his own hip, while Set laughs, blood streaming from matching wounds. The harpoon test, where both gods proved they could endure equal pain. Exhibit 1, Thoth intones. Neither could claim victory through suffering. The second projection shows both gods transformed into massive hippopotami, thrashing in cosmic waters that splash starlight across reality. They bite and tear at each other for 3 solid months, neither able to gain advantage. The watching gods flinch as phantom blood splatters across their faces, disappearing before impact. Exhibit 2. Neither could claim victory through strength, but the third projection makes several younger gods gasp. It shows Set, proud and virile, eating a feast prepared by Horus. The lettuce gleams with suspicious moisture. Set devours it eagerly, unaware that Horus has contaminated it with his seed. Later, before the Ennead, when Set claims to have dominated Horus sexually, a standard victory boast among gods, Thoth calls forth their seed to testify. Set's emerges from the river where Isis had thrown it, but Horus's answers from inside Set's own body. Exhibit 3. Thoth's voice carries a hint of distaste. Victory through creative interpretation of dominance. The boat race projection shows Set in a vessel of solid stone, impossible, magnificent, and slowly sinking, while Horus sails past in painted wood, disguised to look like stone. 80 years, Thoth concludes, and every victory required deception. That's when Isis herself takes the floor, but she doesn't speak. Instead, she transforms, her body shifting into the shape of a beautiful foreign woman, exactly as she appeared decades ago. The projection shows her approaching Set at an oasis, telling him a sob story about her son being robbed of his inheritance by his uncle. Set's projected image, unaware of the disguise, declares passionately, "This is an outrage. No uncle should steal from his brother's son. The boy must have his birthright." The real Set, watching from the defendant's position, doesn't flinch. But when the projection fades, Horus explodes. "Even my victories required lies." The young god's composure finally cracks. Every triumph tainted by mother's schemes and grandfather's games. How is that justice? Mahat's feather, suspended above the proceedings, begins to tilt. Not toward guilt or innocence, but impossibly, it starts to crack down the middle. One half gleaming white, the other staining red. Set stands. The courtroom falls silent as the god of chaos walks to the center of the cosmic floor. When he speaks, his voice carries the rumble of distant thunder and the whisper of sand across tombs. "You call me chaos." He spreads his arms wide, and his shadow stretches across the assembly, touching every god present. "But I was your border, your boundary, your necessary storm." He turns to face Ra directly. "For 3,000 years, I've stood on your solar bark, fighting Apophis every single dawn. Not for glory, not for power, but because someone had to stand between order and oblivion." His voice rises, filling the space between stars. "I am the desert that makes you treasure water. the storm that makes you value shelter, the war that makes you understand peace. Without me, Egypt drowns in its own comfort, rots in its own perfection. Set's eyes blaze red as fresh blood. If I am condemned for being what you needed me to be, then condemn the sun itself. It burns, grandfather. It burns to keep you alive. The Ennead erupts in whispers, arguments, divine confusion. Ma'at's feather completes its impossible split. One half pure white, one half deep red, spinning slowly in the cosmic void. Ra rises from his throne, and reality holds its breath. The verdict the sun god pronounces, his voice containing the weight of creation itself, is neither innocence nor guilt. It is necessity. He gestures, and chains of sunlight materialize around Set's wrists, not cruel iron, but bonds of pure solar fire. Set, god of chaos, you will not die. You will not rule. You will serve. Ra's eyes are older than time, sadder than extinction. Bound to my solar bark for eternity, you will guard the very dawn you sought to destroy. The condemned will protect what he cannot possess. The chains flare and fade, leaving marks that glow beneath Set's skin like veins of molten gold. Horus receives his crown, but it sits heavy on his young head. Victory and defeat have become indistinguishable. In the cosmic courtroom, Ma'at's broken feather continues spinning, white and red. The courtroom begins to dissolve around them, stone pillars fading into starlight, the golden scales of justice scattering into constellations above. Each god's form wavers, revealing what they truly are, not beings of flesh, but living contradictions written in the night sky. Set's appearance finally makes sense. That impossible animal the Greeks couldn't name. It was never meant to be recognized. The forked tail splits like the Nile Delta, each branch representing a choice: destruction or discipline, chaos or change. His red skin isn't the color of evil. It's the desert's lifeblood, the iron and sand that creates life from death. Those square-tipped ears that hear no prayers, they listen instead to the silence between heartbeats, the space where transformation lives. The ancient Egyptians gave him epithets that contradict: Lord of Strength and Bringer of Confusion, Protector of Ra and Enemy of Order. They understood what we've forgotten. Set wasn't meant to make sense. He was meant to make Horus necessary. Look at them standing there in judgment's aftermath. Horus's falcon eye sees the visible world with perfect clarity. The flooding patterns, the harvest cycles, the predictable rhythms of Ma'at. But Set's beast head sees what shouldn't exist: the storm that saves a dying crop, the conflict that prevents stagnation, the necessary evil that keeps good from becoming weak. The divided crown tells the real story: white for Upper Egypt, red for Lower, but also white for order, red for chaos. The pharaohs wore both because Egypt needed both. Remove Set's red crown, and Horus's white crown means nothing. Remove chaos, and order becomes death. This is why the trial destroyed the gods' certainty. They discovered they weren't separate beings, but aspects of a single, impossible truth. The ancient texts call this Zep Tepi, the first time, when contradictions hadn't yet pretended to be enemies. The gods look at each other across the dissolving courtroom and see, perhaps for the first time, their own reflections staring back. Set didn't disappear. He became the precedent. Look at any courtroom today. Not the physical space, but the invisible architecture of judgment itself. Every time a society puts its own protector on trial, every time we prosecute the very force that kept darker chaos at bay, we're reenacting that divine tribunal. The Egyptians didn't just record a myth. They documented the first time civilization discovered it could criminalize its own survival instinct. Think about this pattern. The soldier who breaks protocol to save lives faces court-martial. The whistleblower who violates confidentiality to prevent disaster becomes the defendant. The emergency responder who destroys property to create a firebreak gets sued by the property owner saved from the flames. We've institutionalized the divine paradox, punishing the chaos that protects us from worse chaos. But here's what makes this recognition uncomfortable. We need this trial to keep happening. Not because justice demands it, but because stagnation is death by another name. Every innovator who's ever been called reckless, every reformer labeled dangerous, every pioneer prosecuted for disturbing the peace, they're all wearing Set's crown, standing in that same divine dock. The very word setback carries his name, marking moments when forward motion meets necessary resistance. When we say something is set in stone, we're invoking his principle of forces that must be opposed to be understood. The psychological truth cuts deeper. Inside every human mind, Horus and Set face each other daily. Your logical mind, the Horus that plans, organizes, maintains order, constantly prosecutes your Set nature, that part that knows sometimes the map must be thrown away, the rules broken, the comfortable order disrupted. We call it impulse control, but the Egyptians saw it more clearly. It's an eternal trial where neither side can afford to win completely. Watch how modern systems recreate this divine tension. Regulatory bodies that stifle innovation while preventing catastrophe. Ethics committees that slow progress while protecting subjects. The entire apparatus of checks and balances. It's the trial of Set made permanent, institutionalized, essential. We've built our civilization on the principle that power must constantly justify itself to the order it protects. The Egyptians encoded this wisdom deliberately. They knew that any culture that completely vanquishes its Set force, that achieves perfect order, has signed its own death warrant. Perfection doesn't evolve. Unchallenged harmony becomes brittleness. The trial wasn't about determining guilt. It was about keeping both forces engaged, neither triumphant, both essential. This is why the myth resonates across millennia. Not because we've forgotten it, but because we live it. Every generation puts its necessary chaos on trial, and every generation must learn why the verdict can never be final. So why was it called the trial that split heaven in half? Because it shattered the illusion that divinity means agreement. The gods had believed their immortality made them immune to contradiction, that their power meant they could exist above the messy balance of opposing forces. But when Set and Horus stood before that divine court, bleeding gold and breathing thunder, they forced every deity to choose a side. And in choosing, the gods discovered something terrifying. They needed both. The trial didn't destroy Set or Horus, it destroyed their certainty. The nephew who claimed order learned he carried his uncle's chaos in his blood. The uncle who embodied destruction discovered he was keeping creation alive. They weren't opposites. They were two halves of the same eternal argument. And that argument was what kept the universe turning. Picture that courtroom without walls again. Now watch as it transforms. The pillars become the horizon. The golden floor becomes sand meeting sky. And there, see it? The feather of Ma'at stretches into a single line of light, dividing darkness from day. Every sunrise is that verdict repeating. Set drives his spear through Apophis in the underworld's depths. Ra's boat crests the horizon. The feather reforms, perfectly balanced between night and morning. Chaos condemned, yet essential. Order triumphant, yet incomplete. You've just witnessed divine justice fracture when gods judge their own. But there's an Egyptian deity who never needed judgment. because she is judgment. Next time, we'll meet Ma'at, the goddess whose single feather outweighed the hearts of gods and kings.